My life at 15 was a tangled mess of teenage angst and rebellion, utterly ordinary in its chaos. Then, in one horrifying, fiery moment, everything changed. I should have died that night, left for dead in the woods. But what happened next defies all logic, shakable truth. What if death isn't the end, but merely a beginning to a reality far grander than we can imagine?
Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment. I'd love to know, do you believe consciousness continues after death? Or is this life all there is? Either way, grab a drink, get comfortable, and enjoy the story.
Before my NDE, I was a deeply troubled and friendless teenager, cut off from others and without any real way to handle my emotions. Spiritual beliefs offered me no solace. Though raised in a Christian home, I had been a skeptic my whole life. Before that night, my world was a tightly wound ball of teenage angst, frustration, and a profound sense of displacement. I was Sarah, a 15-year-old girl uprooted from everything familiar and flung into a new, unwelcome reality. My stepdad had moved us across states, tearing me away from the friends, the life, and even the high school sweetheart I adored. Suddenly, the comforting rhythm of my small-town existence was replaced by the jarring dissonance of an unfamiliar city I utterly detested. Every brick building, every crowded street felt alien, hostile. I spent my days adrift, a ghost haunting the hallways of a new school where fitting in felt like an impossible, pointless task. My life wasn't just externally disrupted, it was crumbling from within, too. My parents' constant arguments had escalated into a relentless barrage, splintering our family dynamic. The home that once felt like a sanctuary now resonated with tension, a battleground of hushed whispers and explosive outbursts. I retreated further into myself, a defensive shell hardening around my already fragile spirit. My coping mechanisms, if you could even call them that, were practically non-existent. I had no healthy outlets for the torrent of emotions raging inside me, the anger, the loneliness, the crushing sense of betrayal. Instead, I gravitated towards the wrong crowds, seeking solace in rebellion, in fleeting moments of recklessness that offered a temporary escape from the suffocating reality of my life. Looking back, my emotional landscape was a bleak, desolate expanse. There was no joy to speak of, only a gnawing boredom punctuated by spikes of intense anger and a deep-seated, unspoken disappointment. I craved connection, belonging, yet pushed everyone away. My days were a monotonous cycle of school, arguments, and the hollow pursuit of cheap thrills. I felt invisible, unheard, and utterly alone in a world that seemed determined to inflict misery. My relationship with life, and particularly with the concept of death, was one of profound skepticism and resentment. My family adhered to a Christian faith, but I had always been an agnostic, even as a child. The idea of a benevolent God seemed like a cruel joke, a convenient delusion in a world rife with suffering. If a God truly existed, I reasoned, he must be either indifferent to human pain or, worse, actively punitive. I saw no evidence of divine love, only endless struggle and heartache. I wanted absolutely no part of it, no part of any spiritual belief system that claimed to offer comfort in the face of such overwhelming hardship. Death to me was simply the end, a void, a merciful cessation of pain. I didn't fear it. In many ways, I quietly welcomed the thought of its finality, a definitive escape from a life I felt trapped in. This profound cynicism, this wall of disbelief, would make the experience to come even more jarring, even more impossible to reconcile with my preconceived notions of reality. My poor choices that night compounded disastrously. On top of deceiving my parents to attend the party, I made the far worst mistake of taking an unfamiliar substance. Its effects were so sudden and overwhelming that I had no chance to get to safety, or even ask for help. The day it happened began like any other Friday in my new, suffocating reality. The morning light filtered weakly through my window, doing little to dispel the gloom that perpetually hung over our fractured household. Breakfast was a quiet affair, punctuated only by the clinking of cutlery and the unspoken tension between my parents. I went through the motions of getting ready for school, pulling on clothes that felt like a costume, a desperate attempt to blend in, to disappear. The school day itself was a blur of indifferent faces and mind-numbing lectures. Every moment felt stretched, an eternity of tedious conformity, while my mind raced with plans for escape, for anything that promised a flicker of excitement or distraction. That evening, the lure of a party deep in the woods, far from the prying eyes of adults, felt like a lifeline. It wasn't a spontaneous decision, it was the culmination of weeks of feeling isolated and desperate for a connection. Any connection. I'd heard whispers about these weekend gatherings out on the reserve, notorious for their unsupervised freedom. It was a risky proposition, involving elaborate lies to my parents and a clandestine rendezvous. But the promise of forgetting, even for a few hours, outweighed any sense of caution. My twin sister, who usually shared my adventures, was home that night, a fact that later gnawed at me. There was no premonition, no shiver down my spine that this ordinary Friday would unravel into something utterly extraordinary and terrifying. My only sensation was a dull throb of anticipation, a desperate hope for something, anything, to break the monotony. As dusk settled, I slipped out, the cool night air a welcome contrast to the stifling atmosphere of home. The journey to the party was long, winding through unlit back roads until the familiar hum of civilization faded into the quiet embrace of the woods. When I finally arrived, the scene was exactly what I'd imagined: a roaring bonfire casting dancing shadows on a large group of people, most of whom I didn't know. The air buzzed with loud music, laughter, and a sense of wild abandon. It felt exhilarating, dangerous, exactly what I thought I wanted. I gravitated towards a cluster of strangers, a motley crew who seemed as lost and searching as I was. In my eagerness to belong, to shed the skin of the miserable, friendless teenager, I made a series of monumentally foolish choices. The first was being there at all, a lie built on layers of deception. The second, far more catastrophic, was accepting drugs from someone I'd just met with absolutely no understanding of what they were or what they would do. My judgment, already clouded by desperation and a thirst for oblivion, vanished completely. The drugs hit me with a brutal, disorienting force, far quicker than I could have anticipated. One moment, I was laughing, feeling a fleeting sense of liberation. The next, the world began to warp. The initial rush gave way to a sickening wave of paranoia and dread. The fire, which had been so inviting, began to pulse with an unnatural intensity. The faces around me, once merely unfamiliar, started to twist and contort, their features elongating, their eyes widening into grotesque, demonic masks. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. I tried to speak, to call for help, but my tongue felt thick and useless. The laughter around the bonfire, once a joyous sound, morphed into a cacophony of sinister cackles. The vividness of the hallucinations was terrifying, each monstrous face leering, closing in. My mind screamed for escape, for any refuge from the encroaching horror. I was trapped, utterly alone in a nightmare conjured by chemicals, surrounded by what my drug-addled brain perceived as genuine demons. Two paths presented themselves in that moment of absolute terror: the dense, black woods, an abyss of unknown dangers, or the roaring, consuming fire, a terrifying but strangely alluring escape from the immediate, monstrous threat. My panic overwhelmed any sense of self-preservation. Driven by a primal instinct to flee the grotesque faces, to escape the palpable evil I felt closing in, I chose the fire. It felt like the only way out, the only way to break free from the terror that had consumed my mind. The agony was immediate and all-consuming. I was engulfed in flames for what felt like an eternity before anyone could reach me. Later, in that other place, I was stunned into silence by a single, profound statement. You select your life on earth, and with it, you select your own hardships. It was a revelation that stopped my spiraling anger in its tracks. The moment I ran into that fire, the world exploded into a symphony of agony. It wasn't just heat. It was a living, breathing entity of pain, scorching every inch of my skin, seizing my breath. I lit up like a Roman candle, as I later described it, consumed in an instant by a fiery embrace that felt both incredibly vivid and strangely detached. There was a brief, horrifying awareness of the screams, not just my own, but the distant, muffled cries of others. I remember the searing smell of burning flesh, the crackle of flames, and then, mercifully, a fading. My body, my physical form, became secondary, a distant sensation as the agony slowly, blessedly began to recede. Then, an abrupt, visceral shift. The world around me dimmed, colors fading, sounds muffling. I was no longer running, no longer burning. A profound sense of weightlessness enveloped me, an unimaginable lightness replacing the crushing torment. It was as if a heavy cloak had been shed, leaving me buoyant, ethereal. I didn't see my body from above in the traditional sense, but I felt it, a faint echo of its pain, a low, irregular thrumming from what I instinctively knew was my heart, struggling, pausing, then struggling again. The desperation I'd felt moments before, the terror of the hallucinations, transformed into a single internal plea, a mantra that echoed in the silent expanse of my mind. Just let me out. Just let me out. It was a desperate cry for release from the burning, from the pain, from the entire horrific ordeal. And then, just as quickly, the world dissolved. My consciousness, my very essence, was pulled upwards, rapidly, into a vast, dark tunnel. It was not a gentle ascent, but a strong, deliberate suction, like being drawn through a cosmic vacuum. The tunnel was perfectly round, an infinite cylinder of pitch black, yet I moved through it with incredible speed, feeling neither fear nor discomfort. The drug-induced terror was gone, replaced by a strange, anticipatory calm. The physical sensation of being pulled lasted for what felt like an eternity and no time at all, a journey through absolute void, until, just as suddenly, I was released. I landed not on solid ground, but on a vast, dark plain. It was an alien landscape, a desolate expanse of rocky, treeless terrain, shrouded in a swirling gray mist that moved with a gentle, unseen wind. Looking up, I saw stars, but they were unlike any I'd ever seen from Earth. Brighter, more numerous, constellations I didn't recognize, shimmering with an ethereal glow. The light here was dim, a soft luminescence that permeated everything. Yet the overall feeling was one of profound peace and quiet. The only sound was the whispering wind, a gentle sigh through the mists. It was a scene that could easily belong in a horror or sci-fi movie, yet it held an undeniable serenity that defied its desolate appearance. To my right, towering above the mist, was a huge, ancient-looking stone wall. It stretched endlessly, resembling a massive panel from some colossal city. An intuitive understanding settled over me. Behind this wall lay a city, vast and silent, as if everyone within its confines was asleep. The stillness was absolute, broken only by a sound that drifted down from over the walls, music. It was soft, distant, yet utterly captivating. I had never heard anything like it before, nor have I since. This wasn't just music, it was love and hope made audible, an impossibility in earthly terms, yet undeniably real here. My heart literally ached with a longing to find its source, to immerse myself in its exquisite beauty. Even now, decades later, recalling that melody makes me hum inside, a resonance of that profound harmony. It is one of the things I yearn to experience again when my time comes. A shocking realization then dawned on me. I had no body, yet I felt perfectly fine, whole, complete. The horrifying hallucinations that had driven me into the fire had vanished. They must have ceased the moment I entered the tunnel, as that was the last time I felt the lingering effects of the drugs. Strangely, though, I could still feel a faint, distant pain. This puzzled me. Why pain in a place so peaceful, so seemingly free? It felt wrong, an anomaly in this serene existence. Then I became aware of a tether. I call it that because, on Earth, I had no concept of a spiritual tether, but I used to play tetherball with my sisters, and the image felt apt. This tether was invisible, yet undeniably present, attached to my left side, trailing off behind me, back towards Earth. I possessed an innate understanding that Earth was too far for humans to travel there and back, a knowledge that simply existed in my mind, as natural and effortless to access as breathing. I could sense my physical body back on Earth, faint and distant, but still in pain and clearly dying. Its heartbeats were weak, the pauses between them unnervingly long, signaling its rapid decline, and I was glad. I wanted nothing to do with that broken flesh. It felt utterly foreign to me now, a discarded husk, and I would even go so far as to say I hated it. Suddenly, a presence manifested before me. It was a beautiful, glowing star, emanating a calm, loving intelligence. This was my guide. I couldn't discern if it was male or female. Such distinction seemed irrelevant here. In that instant, a profound, undeniable truth settled within me. God was real. There was no denying it in this place, this realm where existence was laid bare. A surge of anger, hot and destructive, swelled within me. If God was real, then this being before me, this radiant star, was the architect of all the pain and suffering on Earth, the orchestrator of my own miserable existence up until this point. Anger here was a powerful, almost tangible force, far beyond any earthly emotion. I felt myself swelling with it, growing larger inside my invisible form, an unchecked power threatening to overwhelm whatever I was. I wanted to lash out, to strike this being, to knock it into another cosmos, and terrifyingly, I felt more than capable of doing just that. It scares me to think of it now, that raw, unbridled power. Perhaps that was why I was met outside the city walls. Perhaps they knew I was about to go nuclear. Strangely, my guide remained completely serene, radiating unwavering acceptance and love, a reaction that only fueled my rage further. Then, inexplicably, a chessboard appeared at the place where my feet should have been. I don't know if I willed it into existence or if it was my guide. Still struggling to rein in my furious temper, I pointed at the board and demanded, "Why? Is this some sort of game to you? A joke?" My guide finally communicated, not with an audible voice, but telepathically, directly into my mind. I realized then that I hadn't spoken aloud. There was no need for verbal communication here, as thoughts and understanding were instantaneous and crystal clear, regardless of distance. The guide's words reverberated within me. You choose to live your life on Earth, and you choose your suffering. These words brought me up short, shocking me into complete stillness. My fury dissolved, replaced by incredulity. Only an idiot would choose this, I retorted, the remnants of my earthly skepticism clinging to me. What followed was a much-needed conversation. With each question the guide answered, a calming presence emanated from them, soothing the last vestiges of my anger. I no longer felt my body, confirming my assumption that I was dead. This suited me perfectly. But as we conversed, I noticed the guide's attention kept drifting to my tether, almost with concern. A flicker of hope, or perhaps curiosity, ignited within me. Maybe I was still alive, somehow. The guide explained that we are eternal beings, made of energy and love bound together. On Earth, through the filter of a physical body, personal growth is difficult, often painful, but profoundly accelerating. Choosing to live a human life, or several, is a solution to this. It's an opportunity to learn and grow, to face the struggles of existence. We never truly lose the people we love, for we will see them again as soon as we return home, a comforting assurance in this strange, new reality. They imparted a profound truth. Facing the struggle of living a life through the filter of love was our ultimate test. All the earthly trappings humans fall into, race, religion, politics, sexuality, money, nationality, none of it mattered in the face of this overarching principle of love. We humans live opposite to the way we are supposed to, destroying ourselves in the process. I sensed a subtle shift in the guide's demeanor, a hint of agitation or concern, their attention more fixed on my tether. They began to quickly show me images of my short life, shuffling through them like a deck of cards. They paused only on moments they deemed pertinent, not a full life review, but selected highlights. They explained that I could choose to stay, but I should return and finish my duty. They didn't explicitly define what this duty was, but in that moment, in that place, I instinctively knew. It was a profound, undeniable knowing, a sense of purpose that permeated my entire being. Yet a cruel irony, when I returned to Earth, that specific memory of my duty would fade, leaving me to figure it out for myself. When I protested returning, the guide stated simply, "There are children that need to be born." I scoffed, the 15-year-old in me scoffing at the very idea of having children. I had no desire for kids then, and I told them so. They gently reminded me of my boyfriend, the deep love I had for him, and my twin sister. It was true. I loved my twin, and I was deeply in love with my boyfriend, who I would in fact marry years later, and with whom I would have twins of my own. But even with that knowledge, that understanding of future connections, I still didn't want to go back.
In that place, we are fundamentally different. We think and act differently. Earthly feelings, earthly lives, don't hold the same immediate concerns. I now knew with absolute certainty that I would see them all again. My boyfriend, my twin, my family, and that they would eventually be okay, even if I died and stayed. The conversation returned to duty and work to do. By this point, I was actually joking with the guide. I asked if I was going to receive a pair of wings and a sword, like some celestial warrior. The guide's response silenced me completely. "You won't be receiving wings and a sword here because you are wings and a sword." The words resonated with an undeniable truth, a power that permeated my very core. I was silenced, awestruck. This realization, this profound sense of my own inherent power and purpose, began to shift my resistance. The guide continued, patiently, persistently, eventually convincing me, but I was still unhappy about the prospect of returning to a damaged body, a vessel of pain. I believe the guide sensed this, because as I was being pulled back into the black tunnel, I felt them doing something to my tether. A subtle, healing energy flowed through it. Not a complete restoration, but a profound act of divine intervention, healing me as much as they were allowed to help me survive long enough to get help. It was a miracle that would allow me to heal far better than any earthly medical professional could have predicted. This was the turning point, the gentle nudge back towards the life I had chosen, the duty I had to fulfill.
My return to consciousness was marked by the familiar sight of Earth's stars against a breaking dawn. I was back in the clearing, alone, and the crushing weight of my physical form returned, bringing with it all the pain and utter exhaustion. The return was not a gentle descent. It was an abrupt, jarring plunge. One moment,
I was a limitless being of pure energy, suspended in a realm of profound peace and boundless knowledge, still processing the guide's final profound words. The next, I was violently yanked backward, a dizzying reversal through the black tunnel, the sense of being pulled intense and overwhelming. Then, with a sickening thud, I was back. The first sensation was one of immense weight, a crushing burden after the boundless lightness I'd just known. It was as if I'd been shoved back into a ridiculously ill-fitting suit of armor, heavy and constricting. And then, the pain. It wasn't the searing agony of the fire anymore, but a dull, persistent throb that resonated from every inch of my burned skin. My stomach churned with nausea, and my limbs felt like lead, utterly unresponsive. The shock of reanimating was profound, a brutal awakening from the ethereal to the brutally physical. My eyes flickered open, and the stars I saw were Earth stars, familiar yet strangely diminished after the cosmic tapestry I'd witnessed. Dawn was breaking on the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues, a stark contrast to the dim, mystical light of the other side. I was still in the clearing, lying on the ground, alone. The chill of the pre-dawn air seeped into my battered body, and I could feel every ache, every burn. It was mine again, this broken flesh, and the thought was almost unbearable. My first thoughts were a jumbled mess of disbelief and profound disappointment. "No, not back here," echoed in my mind, a desperate plea. The absolute freedom, the boundless love, the profound understanding I'd experienced were ripped away, replaced by the mundane reality of pain, cold, and dirt. It was a sense of loss so acute it was almost physical. I tried to move, but my muscles screamed in protest. Every shallow breath was a reminder of my confinement, my return to this fragile, suffering form. How could I possibly fit back into this tiny, limited body after knowing what it felt like to be infinite? It felt strange, foreign, a cage I was now forced to inhabit again. My physical state was dire. My body was an open wound, seared and blistering. The strength I'd possessed just hours before was gone, replaced by an overwhelming weakness and disorientation. I felt lightheaded, on the verge of fading again, but this time it was a terrifying thought. The quiet of the woods was suddenly deafening, amplifying my labored breathing and the relentless throb of my injuries.
Eventually, someone found me. I don't remember who or how they reacted initially. The blur of pain and semi-consciousness makes those first moments hazy. What I do recall clearly is the confusion and disbelief that met my attempts to explain. When I was finally coherent enough to whisper fragments of my journey, the reactions were predictable. My mom and sister listened with a mixture of horror and veiled skepticism. They saw my physical wounds, the undeniable evidence of the fire, but the rest, the tunnel, the guide, the city of light, that was too much. It was easier for them to rationalize it as the lingering effects of drugs, a feverish dream brought on by trauma. Their eyes, filled with pity and a touch of fear, spoke volumes. She's been through a terrible ordeal. She's not thinking clearly. Doctors, later, approached my miraculous recovery with a similar, though more clinical, skepticism. I healed faster, better, than anyone could have predicted given the severity of my burns. There were murmurs of resilience and youth, but never an acknowledgement of anything beyond the purely physiological. I knew it was the guide's touch, that subtle healing they'd performed on my tether, allowing me to survive long enough to receive help. But how could I explain that to a medical professional, armed with their charts and their scientific explanations? I quickly learned to keep my experience to myself. The few times I tried to articulate the profundity of what I'd witnessed, I was met with blank stares,
uncomfortable silences, or even subtle suggestions that I was still recovering emotionally. The isolation I'd felt before the NDE deepened in a new, more profound way. I had glimpsed a truth so vast, so undeniable, yet I was stranded back in a world where no one else seemed to grasp it. It was like trying to describe the color red to someone who had only ever seen in black and white. It left me with a profound sense of loneliness, a secret world within me that no one else could access.
The transformation was absolute and lasting. My anger at the world and my family was gone, as was my fear of death. In fact, I now felt the reverse. My newfound certainty in a higher power and the deep desire for people to treat each other with more kindness became permanent fixtures of my being. I see my NDE not as a trauma, but as a precious gift that rescued me from a destructive path. Waking up back in my body that day, under the Earth's familiar stars, was not merely a physical return. It was the genesis of an entirely new existence. The old Sarah, the angry, isolated, cynical teenager, was gone, irrevocably transformed. The changes weren't gradual. They were immediate and profound, etched onto my very being. I am no longer angry towards life and my family, no longer afraid to die. The opposite, actually. This profound shift in my emotional landscape was the most striking initial change. The gnawing resentment that had defined my adolescence simply vanished, replaced by an unfamiliar, pervasive calm. My priorities completely inverted. Before, my life was a chaotic pursuit of distraction and rebellion, a desperate attempt to escape my perceived misery. After, the superficial attractions of my past held no appeal. The bad crowds I had associated with, the fleeting thrills of illicit activities, all seemed utterly meaningless. I craved genuine connection, meaning, and purpose. My relationships with my family, particularly my twin sister, deepened immeasurably. The petty squabbles and resentments of adolescence faded into insignificance when faced with the grander truth of our interconnectedness. My career path, too, became clear. The guide's words, "There are children that need to be born," resonated deeply. While at 15, I'd scoffed at the idea of motherhood, the underlying message of nurturing life, of service, took root. I cleaned up my life with a newfound focus and determination. The path that logically unfolded before me, a calling that felt almost predestined, was to become a nurse. This profession, which I've now practiced for decades, isn't just a job. It's a direct expression of the love and service I witnessed in that other realm. It allows me to alleviate suffering, to offer compassion, to touch lives in a positive way, embodying the very essence of what I was shown was important. My worldview underwent a complete overhaul. The agnostic, cynical girl who believed in an indifferent or punitive God was replaced by someone who knew, with absolute certainty, that God was real. This wasn't a belief born of faith or scripture. It was a truth experienced, witnessed, lived. Yet crucially, this profound spiritual awakening did not lead me to organized religion. On the contrary, I still think religion is a farce. The dogmas, the divisions, the emphasis on rules and rituals rather than the core message of love, it all seemed a distraction from the universal truths I'd been shown. My belief is that of a deist. I believe in a divine creator, a source of all things, but not in the need for intermediaries or rigid institutions. My God is the omnipresent, unconditional love that permeates all existence, the very fabric of reality I touched. The purpose of life, which had always seemed a meaningless struggle, was illuminated. We are here to learn and to grow, specifically through the filter of love. All the earthly divisions, race, religion, politics, sexuality, nationality, are illusions, traps that prevent us from seeing our shared essence, our fundamental unity.
My NDE taught me that we are eternal beings, that death is merely a transition back home, and that the true test of our earthly existence lies in how we navigate challenges and relationships with compassion and understanding. Believing in God and wanting humans to be better to one another, all that was permanent. This isn't just a desire, it's a conviction, a guiding principle that shapes every decision I make. My new mission became clear, even if the specific duty the guide spoke of remained elusive in its detail. It was to live a life imbued with the lessons I'd learned, to spread love, to foster understanding, to be a source of calm and compassion in a world that often feels chaotic and divided. Being a nurse is a direct embodiment of this mission. Every patient I care for, every hand I hold, every kind word I offer is a small act of love, a ripple effect of the profound truth I witnessed. However, integrating such an extraordinary experience into ordinary life was not without its difficulties and challenges. For many years, the profound nature of my NDE created a deep sense of isolation. When I tried to share it, the reactions, disbelief, discomfort, well-meaning but misguided attempts to rationalize it away, taught me to keep it a guarded secret. It felt like living with a vibrant, otherworldly secret that no one else could comprehend. The world, once familiar, now seemed limited, almost dull in comparison to the boundless reality I'd glimpsed. This created a subtle, existential crisis. How do you live fully in a physical body when you know the true nature of existence beyond it? It's taken decades to truly belong in this body again, to feel comfortable and present, to reconcile the infinite with the finite. For over 30 years, I carried this story silently, letting its lessons guide my life, shaping me into a better person. But recently, a work injury forced me into a period of quiet reflection. During that time, I stumbled upon the accounts of others who had experienced something so similar to my own. Hearing their stories was a revelation, shattering the isolation I'd felt for so long. It brought me to tears, an emotional release of decades of suppressed understanding. I realized then the mistake I'd made in keeping my experience to myself, in not allowing my story to potentially help others. My near-death experience was not just a traumatic event, it was an extraordinary gift that saved me from myself. It pulled me back from the brink of a destructive path, offering a glimpse into the profound beauty and purpose of existence. It taught me that despite the pain and suffering we encounter on Earth, a boundless, unconditional love is the fundamental truth of the universe. We are all connected, all part of a larger, beautiful tapestry. I share my story now, not for judgment or validation, but in the hope that it can offer a glimmer of understanding, a sense of connection, or perhaps even a profound peace to anyone who feels lost, alone, or questioning the nature of life and death. I hope to pay that forward by sharing my story with others. We are not merely physical beings. We are wings and a sword, powerful and eternal. Life is a precious opportunity for growth and love, and even in our darkest moments, there is an unwavering guiding presence and a promise of return to a home beyond our wildest dreams.
If this story touched you in any way, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I'd love to hear, have you or someone you know ever experienced something you couldn't explain? Thank you for spending this time with us. May you walk in peace, and may God watch over you always.